So to get started, so the reason why we titled this Designing in the Wild is because it can feel like the wild. It's moving into UX from whatever industry you're coming in or whatever, moving into design, not just UX, can be quite a difficult experience. So the point of this presentation and this process is to provide designers with a little bit of background and some simple applicable tools on how to survive the wild, right? So I must remember to point towards the laptop. It's always such a weird thing for me. Cool. So what's in store for us today is we're going to look at how we got here, because context matters, story matters. Why are we here? A little bit about us and our background, and then understanding the wild. So survival in the wild means you need to understand where you are and some basic tools and specific pointers for identifying exactly where you're going to be. And then how to navigate the wild. And then Caitie is going to take us through a micro practice that will also definitely contribute towards feeling grounded. I had one earlier today and I'd highly recommend it. So why are we here today? We're here today, and for those of you online, please welcome. And I'd love for this to be an interactive session. So please do raise your hands and shout. And I'd love to know if this is relatable to anybody online. Give us some thumbs up. So when you enter the industry, it's a very glowing experience. And especially when I was entering the industry in 2017, you were very much in demand. Your LinkedIn inbox was like filled with recruiter requests and people wanting to offer you jobs, right? But then what would happen about 12 to 24 months later is a lot of people felt burnt out and defeated. And I certainly was one of those people in 2018, about a year into my career as a full-time senior UX designer consultant. So there are many reasons for why that happened. And that's the point of the talk, is to understand the landscape. So I'd love to find out from the people online or here, if you've seen anybody go through this, if you're familiar with this. Have you seen it anywhere? Yes. Please feel, yes, thumbs up, love that. Not seeing people's faces online is always such a tricky thing. So let's chat about how I got here. So as I mentioned, I was a senior UX designer working for a company called Vicka Interactive. And I hope Brendan is online, Brendan and Venita, my two colleagues from the time. Yay. So Vicka Interactive was a company that was founded in 2013, and they did solid UX, right? That's what they specialized in. It wasn't software design, it wasn't UI design, it was solid UX. And Brendan Hull, who was the chief design officer of Vicka, was my mentor entering the industry. And pretty much 90% of what I know that's not theoretical came from working with him, and I'm forever grateful. Then in 2018, I decided to take a break. I felt burnt out. I felt like I needed a change. So I left my job without another job, which is like quite a thing to do. A lot of people thought I was brave. So I thought I'll take a couple of months to go travel and study, and that ended up being 10 months. And then I took a really long break. And eventually, as we all have to do, I had to start earning some money. So I went back to working. But what happened in the process is that I realized that I didn't have a problem with the industry itself. I didn't have a problem with my role. I loved UX. But what I needed to do is I needed to do it on my own terms. I needed to move into a space where I had more autonomy, more authority. And it's not everyone's cup of tea to work for yourself. But then since then, I've been either a freelance consultant or running my own business. Right. And I have no regrets. So then 2020 happened. So before that, what Brendan and I observed, and a lot of the other designers that we used to work with, is that these situations would pop up, right? Where we're going to use Alex as the persona for the story, or the hero in the story. So Alex would end up sitting in a room with a product owner, right? And this is, please tell me if this still happens or doesn't. So I don't really do much work in corporate, so I work with smaller businesses now. But anyway, Alex would be the only person in the room with a product owner, always. Then Agile was still new. I don't know if it's still referred to as fragile as a joke, but then we used to do that a lot. So then a fragile project manager. about 3 business analysts, because it was just chaos all the time, a lot of the time, not all the time, and then half a marketing department, because letting go of UI and design is a difficult thing. So they had to bring in an army to deal with the squad, right? And it's what we were often expected to do at the time is provide answers on behalf of the user spontaneously, right? So now you're the UX expert. What do the users want? Now, you can't really speak on behalf of the users because you're not the user, but anyway, so it's a very uncomfortable situation. And what we found is that as a joke, we used to say, like, you feel so uptight, you forget to exhale, right? So another story from the wild is Alex finding herself talking to what then became a stream, right? So we had the development stream, now we had the UX stream. It was a big thing, but nobody really knew what it was, you know? So now you have a meeting with the executive and whoever the assistant is, and they're like, but can't we just get the opinion from Sam in reception on whether this design works? And you're like, that does not constitute user research of any kind, right? Again, an uncomfortable situation, and one forgets to exhale. So then, Brendan and I still continued working throughout this time. And in 2021, we began playing with the concept for what we called, or he came up with the name, UXhale, right? So, and I realized I need to exhale. Inhale and exhale. And so we spoke to people that we knew to find out whether our perceptions of the experience were similar to others, right? So we reached out to designers, some of whom are currently online. And we did a bit of very informal research. It wasn't, 2021 was chaotic, but we tried to get some input from other people and validation in terms of what their experience was. And what we found was that most designers really, really at the core of what they did wanted to serve the user. They wanted to have a purpose. They really wanted to add value and meaning to the things that they were doing. Another thing was they really struggled to deal with stakeholders, right? Raise your hands if you still struggle to deal with stakeholders, right? Then we also found that they struggled to get opportunities to practice proper UX methodologies, right? And they needed recognition for their contributions, because a lot of the time the work that we do, you always see bad CX. Nicholas is a CX expert here in the room, but you always see bad customer experience design and you always see bad user experience design, but nobody talks about the good stuff, right? So one of the quotes that we decided to include was from one of the designers, and what they wanted to do was to make a difference and improve people's lives through the ethical practice of UX, to work on a project that would have real benefits or reaching benefits in the real world, right? And that's, I think, essentially what all of us really want to do. Very few of us just want to come to work and check in and check out, right? So some of the other stuff we found is people struggled to advocate for UX. And I think you'll find the same in CX, right? So why must we do it? People are buying our product, they're doing the things anyway. Then they were quite afraid of failures. Now, we'll get to that part. And many of them identified with imposter syndrome. I think it's a common trend, but we'll get into that as well. And I still identify, I'm still a recovering imposter. I think it will be for life, right? And then a lot of them felt inexperienced naturally because there isn't enough space where you can walk into a safe environment and be supported. So another quote is, on the note of imposter syndrome, is, I don't know enough. I am not keeping up with industry standards or developments, and that I'm literally not qualified to do this. I felt like that a lot of the time, and I think it's a common thing in our industry. So, true to design thinking process and true to me being an incessant problem solver, Brendan and I sat down and we thought, how might we help junior and mid-level designers feel more balanced and more grounded entering the field? And so, and also have a better life-work balance, because if you don't feel grounded, you end up giving too much and you end up burning out. So UXhale was born. And this is this was our concept board. Brendan, this is how I used to drive you insane. I'm very happy probably that you don't have to, you're probably happy that you don't have to work with me anymore. Now I get to drive Caitie insane with my disorderly boards everywhere. But I love big picture thinking and moving fast, so I don't always tidy up my stuff. But anyway, this was our concept. And then what happened is life happened. So I founded Leanseed in 2022, even though I was doing the work already before that. I formally registered the company then. And working on specific projects, we just let this go because it was just a difficult time. It's very difficult to start something new. We all know this, right? But here we are today, right? So there are 3 of us that are working on this. It's myself, Caitie, and Lisa. She's the other team member. So we collaborate together on many different UX and other projects and research projects. So any questions or comments so far? Please shout, online or otherwise. Not yet. Cool, we'll get there. Cool. So now I'd like Caitie to share a little bit about herself.
Oh, hello, everybody. So I'm Caitie. Kind of at the core of who I am is I am a maker. I love to work collaboratively with people. That's why I love working with Vicka. I am also a bit of an incessant planner. And I'm almost a yoga teacher. I actually had my exam last night and it went really well. So I'm really happy about that. I studied interaction design at Open Window. I'm also a registered, well, certified project manager through UCT, and I've just done a whole bunch of IXDF courses. My journey to get here has been a little bit of a weird one. So I started off as a software developer and then transitioned into project management because there was kind of a gap in the team. And through that, I did a lot of facilitation and all that. Here's some pictures as well. So I did a lot of workshop facilitation and stuff, and I got super burnt out. So at the kind of beginning of last year, I left my job like Vicka did with no plan, and I just started kind of figuring out what it was that I wanted to do, where I wanted to go. I've been trying a whole lot of things since then. I always loved design. That's kind of what I always wanted to do. And I'm coming back to that now. So working with Vicka, doing a lot of design thinking stuff, strategy, product design, a bit of dev still. And then I'm also dipping my toes into some marketing and strategy and graphic design and just trying everything and seeing what I actually really love. So that's me. Handing back to Vicka.
Thank you. And I particularly enjoyed Caitie's yoga teacher training because yesterday, so when we collaborate about twice a week and work from the same space from our house, and then we took a break and then she practiced her exam route on me. That was amazing. We exhaled, yes. Okay, so for those of you who are wondering about my name, a quarter of my life I've spent in Russia and the rest of it is in South Africa. And I also made my niece come here because I wanted to get into design thinking. So everybody sell design thinking to her, please. So I am an incessant problem solver. And I think when I see things that are not working, I can't really help myself but get involved, for better or for worse. This has also been a problem and I've been told to back off. So I'm a lover of learning to the point that in 2023, or actually 2019, I did a diploma, a postgraduate diploma in design thinking and innovation. And then in 2023, I did a crazy thing and I went to study general management at Gibbs. I nearly lost my life, but I made it through. And then, so what I've done is I've done a lot of different kinds of design. So I started with e-commerce in 2002 when nobody really knew what the web was and they thought you just like clapped your hands and the web page arrived, you know. So I've done instructional design, e-learning, I've done systems design, I've done process design, all kinds of design. So wherever there's a problem, I'm there with design, basically. So and when I say who I am, I mean it's the person that I can't help being, and I can't help being the mother of dogs either. So in my spare time, I drum, I dance, I hike, and do all the fun things. And the third person on the team who couldn't make it today, but she's online, is Lisa. And I met Lisa when I worked at UNISA in 2002. And she's been a career and student counseling specialist for many, many years. And in 2022, okay, actually, we'll get there. So she's also a maker, also a problem solver. So you can imagine we all click really well. And the thing that binds us together is that we support each other in learning. So we work very informally and we work not all the time together, but we work consistently together, right? And Lisa is a game maker, which is quite an interesting thing. So she makes all kinds of games. So she also does human-centered design, facilitation, mentoring, and content curation. But now the thing that we kind of forced her to include in this slide is all the things that she studied, and she has studied all the things. So on top of her, so what she does within the team typically is research. She and I have done a lot of field research. We've gone to, our client was bulk mining explosives, and we have done the safety boots and the caps and done the truck and whatever stuff and usability testing, but she's literally done almost every UX qualification under the sun. So if you ever want to find out which one's for you, she's the person to talk to. So, and she's contributed quite a lot to this presentation from a career and student counseling perspective, from a psychological perspective. And whenever I don't feel zen, she makes me feel zen when I talk to her. Right. So back to designing in the wild. So now quite a bit of time has passed from when Brendan and I started this, and obviously things change as they do, and especially in UX and tech. So we decided to speak to some of our people again to find out what is actually going on in the industry now, for those who work on site and so on. And what we found is that people are still pivoting into UX from very unconventional and unknown paths. Unlike engineering or architecture or law, you don't follow a set path where you go write your articles and you now suddenly graduated into the real world, you know. We also found out that people most of the time learn on the job because the industry is constantly changing. So irrespective of what theory you have to go and practice it, and they go find videos and all the trends and so on. So they still have a desire to be useful, recognized, and to see their work make a difference. And then lastly, the one thing that remains solid across all industries, and especially in our industry, is relationships and building relationships with people. Because without relationships, you don't get anywhere. If people don't get you and you don't get them, you're stuck. So one of the quotes that we got out of our latest sort of conversations, and this was not formalized research, it was not serious contextual interviews, it was, semi-structured interviews. So a lot of the pressure on things that are not well defined. And it's all a little insane or very insane. So who can raise their hand to that online or in person? Yeah. CX must be the same. Must be the same. Hand up. Oh, Naps. Thanks, Naps. Right. So in this process, to help make sense of this chaos, we identified 3 influential areas that determine our experience. So the first one is our working environment. So all working environments are different. Some have similarities. So you might work for a company of 60, you might work for a company 1,700, you might work for a company of 3 or with a company of 3, right? So understanding your working environment is critical. The second thing is understanding where we are as UX practitioners, and that has a lot of dimensions to it, right? And we're going to chat about that shortly. But the most defining aspect of this is our own internal perceptions of our environment and how we experience what is happening around us. And this could be true for any industry, really, like as a starting designer or as a starting engineer, doesn't matter. So, but we're here for a talk on starting the UX design career, so we're going to focus on that. So looking at the UX environment, I know you mentioned that you have done a talk about this recently. So there are many models for the maturity of an organization in terms of their UX capacity. But I like to use the NN Group one, and it has evolved from being 8 stages to 6. Now that I checked it, I haven't looked at it in a while. So the thing is that you might find, I got this clicker today, especially for this chat, so I can do things. So the thing that most of us will find is that very few organizations are going to have an absent stage or UX maturity, and most of us fit in here somewhere. But the thing that's really important, and the best way to identify where your organization is in terms of UX maturity, is to look, oh gosh, wrong button, too many buttons. Oh dear. Go back. Right. Bad user experience design. Where's the tactile? Okay, so anyway, the thing that we would need to focus on is figuring out exactly what are the challenges that you're facing. Because there's no point in trying to establish organization-wide metrics for success in terms of user experience design if we don't have a structure, if we don't have a proactive UX strategy. Same goes for CX. So same goes for anything really. So the second part is, where are we as UX practitioners? So there are very unique characteristics to the UX design career, and that is because it's so novel. So the one thing is, it's very difficult to explain to your uncle at a braai, like what you do as a UX designer. If you say you're an engineer or an accountant or any of the known sort of things, it's like, oh, cool. When you say UX design, and my brother still calls it UIX intentionally. So when you say UX designer, they go like, what is that? Or user experience design. I think that's a better way. And I've come up with many different ways of explaining it in one sentence. But the second thing is it can be a real rabbit hole, and it can become very overwhelming because it's constantly evolving and the specializations are changing all the time. So it's difficult once you get into it. And if you're like me that wants to get to the bottom of the truth, which is why I did the general management sort of business study aspect, is because I want to understand how to marry all of these things into one, it can become very overwhelming. So then there's a whole bunch of trendy terms. I don't know if you've ever heard of something called boardroom bingo. Right, so it's when a bunch of executives throw around very fancy words, right? So a lot of the terms that we use in UX, unfortunately, become boardroom bingo, and people use them very loosely without really understanding what they mean. And going and asking Sam about her opinion is not user research, right? We know this. So the other thing is that there's really not enough available mentors and coaches in the field. So even if people have the capacity, and the capacity is often the constraint because we've got so few senior UX designers, it's very difficult to have somebody who can actually hold your hand and help you navigate the space. So one of the things that I experienced entering the industry is I had to know how to do everything. Information architecture, I had to be, and I don't like UI. It's not my thing. It's not what I do. I love research. I love strategy. I love understanding systems. I love architecture, like in, the bigger picture thinking. Don't make me do buttons and things. So I love Caitie. So anyway, so you expected to know everything UX on your behalf and the behalf of the user. So it's an evolving field of specializations. And since I've been out of the industry for so long, as in working directly with it, I'd love to invite definitions of specializations within UX. Please, people online, I'd love to hear from you first, if there's anything. Moving from, for example, research as a specialization, what else is out there? Oh, they chat. You're welcome to post it in the chat. It's those awkward moments when you try to engage with people online. It just doesn't happen. So, nobody. Cool. Hey? Anyone in the room? Yes. Oh, cool. Thank you.
Design system specialist and growth design.
Growth design, that's a new thing. Yes. We've heard of that. Cool. So in 2021, when Brendan and I were looking into this, we identified broadly these, and obviously they've evolved. And then now there's something like ethical design. Well, ethical design has always been a thing, but it's now a specialization. We forgot to include accessibility here, but accessibility was also a specialized field, and Lisa is very passionate about accessibility. So it's very difficult to be in the space of, for example, user needs research and continuously be, I'm looking at something that's more technical. So innovation and technology, like I always call myself a Neanderthal, right? So technological Neanderthal, because I'm more interested in human needs, and there are way better people who are more interested in tech, you know. And Nick and I are like, you know, working on exploring AI and learning more about it, you know. Yeah. And not being tech native, right? So I'm Gen X, so I'm tech savvy. I had to learn how to, I got my first computer when I was 19 years old. You know, when I left matric was when we got our first Bosch phone, and it was this like thing that looked like a walkie-talkie that I inherited from my dad, you know. So, right, so things change all the time. So where this matters, right, is understanding what you're naturally good at. And Caitie's going to talk about that shortly. So it's no wonder when we're working in such varying environments and we have so many different specializations of things that are evolving all the time, it's very difficult to keep your balance. It's very difficult to keep your cool. And there's also very specific characteristics that are inherent to most 99.9% of the designers that I've worked with, and that we all care. And that is a problem. When you care too much, you become too involved, and then you end up taking everything on. So how do we deal with this? That's why we're here. And we cannot share everything. There was a lot more stuff that Brendan and I explored in the beginning. So we included specific things that we thought we could cover in a talk. So how to navigate the wild. So the one most important defining aspect of the influencing or the areas is our perceptions and our internal experience. So when I left for my sabbatical, I was burnt out, as I mentioned, and I felt like I couldn't make the impact that I was looking to make, and that nobody was buying into the process. And now I realized that I was way too passionate, that I was way too pushy. And instead of using, we're going to talk about stakeholders, but instead of designing for the stakeholders, I was just passionate about the users and doing the right thing and being quite perfectionist about it. But the real world is not like that. So you have to understand how mature or how wild your environment is. And you have to look at using, whether it's the NN Groups model or any other model, figure out where you are, because it's going to give you a nice platform to understand what battles to fight. So the second thing you need to do is you need to explore power and influence within your team and within your organization. So what this means is you have to understand who makes the decisions, right? And who are the people who champion UX, who can back you up, who can help you. How does UX fit in the overall product design process? So do we do user research, or do we do validation of the product, right? So do we do interviews, observations, or do we only do usability testing? And those things are very critical, because if you're going to push for research and nobody's got the budget or the buy-in, it's not going to work. And I'm sure it's the same with CX. I'm sure you're hearing similar stories there, right? Now, the third thing that's really important is, while we're looking at the environment, we have to look at our role and our expectations of the environment. So is this a place where you're expected to take initiative? Or is this a place where you have to earn trust first? Do you take things on boldly, or do you do a little bit and iterate? Do you have to introduce? Can you push? What leverage do you have in terms of design? And based on that, you make decisions around how you act yourself. And lastly, be curious. Now, that one is a very tricky one, because I'm a person who really likes to be certain about things. Like, I don't like to not know. And being curious means that we have, and that's something that I learned a lot from Brendan. Brendan, a lot of credit goes to you here, is learning to not know and coming in with a mind of somebody who doesn't, you know. And even with this talk, I'm absolutely 150% aware that everything is a hypothesis until you've tested it with the users. So I really look forward to your feedback to know whether this works for you now and later, but we've just started. So, so things to look out for when figuring out the nature of your environment is tackling the wrong obstacle. And that talks to the UX maturity. So if you're pushing for the wrong things, you're going to just come up against constant pushback. being too passionate or evangelical. So I would get very excited, and when I get upset, it's very visible. I'm very easy to read. So I would sit in a room with a bunch of like really important people, and I'd be like, how do you do this? Like, how do you not do user research? How can you design without this? And that upset a lot of people, you know, instead of getting buy-in. So trying to change the system. So this one is a big one with UX maturity and influence. The nature of systems is that they've come to exist like that after a long set of iterations and processes. The more we perturb the system, the more it's going to resist. So it's really important to remember to try and find flow with what you're dealing with instead of trying to push harder and harder. Sometimes you need to actually go gentler instead of harder. So taking too much or too little responsibility. Now, I don't know if you've heard of the ocean test. Openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, can't remember what the A stands for. Agreeableness. Yes, that was not my high score. And neuroticism, right? So it's a personality test. Now, most of the designers that I've worked with have a very high sense of conscientiousness, paying attention to detail, and neuroticism, right? Because we care. That's why we're in this industry, right? So taking on too much responsibility is one of the key things that leads to burnout without understanding what it is that you need to do for yourself, right? And burnout is a tough one to recover from. So how are we doing for time? Good. Okay. So Esti's wisdom from the previous talk, choose your battles wisely, choose your battles. That was one thing that I was running 11 projects when I entered the 2017 space. And I didn't choose my battles. I fought for every one of them. And that was not wise, you know, but I have learned. So does anybody online or here have any other advice for understanding your work environment? Or do you have any specific challenges that you'd like to discuss? Cool. Nick was first, and then I.
So number 2 really hits home.
This one.
Yeah, whenever the word experience features in a job title, the powers that be, the old men in the grey suits who hold the purse strings, it's too abstract for them, and they don't understand how satisfied customers equals, or how happy customers equals money in the bank. So and I found in my experience that tailoring what you say to the people in the room is so super important. And the most important people to speak to are the finance people and the CEO. And the only language they speak is boardroom. They speak rands and cents. How is what you're doing now going to put more money into the group? And sort of developing a good return on investment framework for what you're doing. And I'm sure the same is true for UX, but for CX definitely. It's the Achilles heel of every single experience program, not being able to prove value. But further than proving value, it's not just about happy customers, loyal customers. It's about happy customers, loyal customers, and money in the bank. How do you do that? How do you prove cost reduction, improved efficiency, and profit? And I'm sure that's something that comes quite prevalent in conversations around UX as well. So if you want one piece of advice, make sure that you speak the right language for the people that you're speaking to. And 9 times out of 10, they won't know the ROI is good.
Absolutely. Does anyone else have anything to add to that? 100%.
Yeah.
Sorry, please go ahead. Yes.
Oh, okay. Hey, Vicka.
Hi, who's there?
Yeah. Kels.
Hey, Kels. Nice to hear from you.
Cool. Yeah, I'm in a bit of a situation where it's like quite the opposite of that, right? Where you have quite a lot of buy-in. You're in an organization that's very UX mature, and they're all about client centricity. Now the challenge there of being in that space where you have all the buy-in you need is that most of your stakeholders start seeing themselves as designers, right? And they tend to sort of want to, I believe in code design. I believe in bringing your stakeholders along the journey, but sometimes they tend to overstep their mark. So yeah, that's currently what I'm trying to figure out how to deal with, especially, you know, going along with the topic of designing in the wild. Even though an organization might be mature, it might present different types of challenges.
Thanks for sharing that, Kels. It's a very good point. So I think I just want to comment on Nick's comment first. And I think one of the critical things that is a challenge for design in general is when you want metrics, to find starting metrics, like which company actually runs proper stats and which company actually has any data point from which you're working to prove the ROI. But I mean, it's a very, very valid point. So Kels, about your dilemma. So we're going to chat about dealing with stakeholders shortly. And I think that it is the easiest way to deal with it is to get a whip for the boardroom and try and get people to calm down. No, I'm joking. But obviously, I think it is a difficult situation. Does anybody else have a similar context with which they're working where there is buy-in, but it's difficult to manage every person who believes that they are a designer? You have that, Nick? Anybody else? Yeah. So any tips for how to manage that? The whip idea, yeah. It always works. Yeah, I think it is a tricky one. And I think it comes down to when you look back, I'm just going to go back to the process and looking at an actual strategy for how you are going to execute it, right? So it means looking at, it means engaging with the users more and more, because if you're not engaging with your customers and you're not engaging with the users, you're still designing by committee, right? So all of our findings and all of our design decisions need to be rooted in what the users need. And I think that often when you don't have that, then you have a room full of designers. And I think by all means, if you look at design thinking in terms of the 5 stages of empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test, if you don't do the empathize stage properly, it becomes really difficult to measure your starting point. So I think in your case, a way of dealing with this might be to look at the process of how you guys perceive UX and what it actually means so that you find stakeholder alignment. And we're going to chat about that now. Is that making sense so far?
Yeah, 100%.
I think.
Sorry, go on.
Working backwards from the outcome.
Yes.
Is a great way, you know, understanding what success looks like at the end of the day.
Yes.
I often use the analogy of working in the Simba chip factory.
Right.
Not everybody who works in the Simba chip factory is a chip expert.
Yes.
But everybody knows the difference between a good and a bad chip.
Yes.
And I think if you understand what a good chip looks like, you don't have to be the person who also understands the nuts and bolts of getting to that good chip. But as long as you know, because there's the packaging, there's the the flavoring, there's the whatever. As long as you are aligned as an organization about what a good chip is, then you can leave manufacturing the good chip to the expert. And I think it's like governance is such an important thing in this aspect, where being able to draw the lines to say we are all aligned as an organization about what a good chip is, but leave making the chip to the experts.
100%.
And if the chip is not right, hold the experts accountable. But you don't have to be a chip expert.
Makes a lot of sense. And it is very difficult because I think design is very exciting because you can go into Word and you can do things, and like we all interact with some products and apps. So we all have a perception of what that means. Sorry, you had a question. Or you had your hand up earlier. Yes. Right. Okay. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Cool. Sorry, you had your hand up.
Yeah.
Yes. Do you mind putting your mic on so we can?
How do you measure towards a highly environment? Thank you.
How would you measure that? So I guess it's a very good question. I think if you have a look at a specific model, right, it will give you cues for where your organization is, how you're organized, and what I think, like, when UX is there, when there's buy-in, and when the processes are there. So when there's user research and direct engagement with users, whether it is observations, direct primary research, right? And there's usability testing before you go to market and so on, then you're there, right? But I think referring to a specific model to look at that will give you more cues. It's a little bit of a too detailed subject to discuss, unless anybody else has any quick guidance.
You can also look at the UX maturity of the specific team that you're in.
Yes.
Because it can vary. Like, you can be in a team that is more mature in a company that doesn't understand at all what you do, or the
Absolutely
as well. So
yes.
kind of looking at what's going on around you and just kind of observing goes a long way.
And what we're going to do is actually IXDF has an excellent article that compares different UX maturity models, and the NN group is one of them, right? So what we're going to do is, if you give us your feedback, we're going to share a QR code to a feedback form later. Naps, I see your hand up, and I'm going to get you now. And then we'll share all the resources that we used we'll share the presentation and all the resources that we found useful in updating this and looking into this. Naps, would you like to go ahead?
Cool. I hope you guys can hear me. I'm a little sick, so sorry if I sound like I've coughed up a frog. But I think it's backtracking a little bit, but something I found in terms of getting stakeholder buy-in for people who don't believe in UX versus getting too much buy-in where it feels like you're collaborating with your stakeholders. Like, one thing that I found is using like data-driven design and decisions to steer it in the direction that aligns to, I guess, the model in which you're trying to align to. So if you have a stakeholder who's designing with you, like, he's like, open up your Figma, let's do this. It's like, okay. Entertain it, but be like, okay, if you do have the resources, of course, be like, we will do some A/B testing, we'll see what works. And then that is a piece of data or qualitative data that you can use in order to strengthen your argument, or in some cases, open your eyes, because someone else has thought about it a different way. They probably understand the audience through a different mindset than you do as designers. We lead with our hearts. They think with their pockets. That sounds awful, but you know what I'm saying.
True story.
You know what I mean? So it's a way to work with them so that they're heard, because you want to ensure that that relationship and that bond strengthens over time, so it feels collaborative, but they always have something to fall back on. Someone in the room said you need to talk their language. That's a way to talk their language. So data-driven design in both those instances, like, is really, really helpful.
Thanks, Naps. That's very valid points. Kels, I hope that's helping. We're going to move to stakeholder management unless anybody. Okay, so I was reading this, thanks for the feedback. Okay, so I was reading this cool article. I got back into the NN group, media stuff. And I came across this thing, and I think it's so true. And I'm definitely guilty of displaying detectable frustration and irritation with stakeholders. So one of the things is, like, we tend to be very passionate about things, and we tend to really, really care for the human beings that we design for. But the truth of the matter is that our stakeholders are human beings too. And I published an article on my website years ago about how, if you're considering offering design thinking as a service to your customers, you need to begin with design thinking for your teams, because you first design for your team so that you empower them to design for your customers. It doesn't work otherwise. And I think that the one thing that I've learned to understand how to speak the language of a stakeholder better. Now, for the purpose of this context, and I guess going forward, a stakeholder is anybody who has the power to influence your project, whether it is make it sink or swim. So one of the things that's really critical is understanding your stakeholders, and this was mentioned by Naps. is, and Nick, it's important to understand your stakeholders' mental model around UX. So what do they understand it as? Ask questions, probe, instead of having answers. And understand the language that they're speaking. So I see comments coming in, not sure what they are. Hey? Oh, right. And then one of the key things that came from our latest conversations is invest time in your team. So if you want to be understood as a designer, and if you want people to buy into the design process, you have to spend time with your developers, with your product owners. Go and sit next to them. Understand what it is that they have to face and fight. And one of the things that's really important is I can get very, very methodical and really, really, for lack of a better word, retentive about processes, right? But the truth of the matter is the person that you're dealing with is probably fighting many different wars. And your project is one of the many things that they have to deal with, right? So it's important to invest time in understanding what your stakeholders are dealing with and your entire team, and actively connect with other people, because you have to model the behavior that you want to expect. Be the change you want to see, hashtag, right? The second thing is creating shared understanding. And I think, Kels, this might be something that might be helpful. So Nick beat us to the punch, speak the stakeholders' language, right? So instead of saying user flows, how about we use things like steps that the customer needs to take to achieve goal X? Isn't that so much more relatable, right? But I'm very guilty of using UTs. I'm a UT this, UT that. And then when I worked with BME and new members, oh, what's UT? You know, usability testing. So help them understand what it means and inform them in visual ways. So I've sat in rooms with many engineers, software engineers, who are really, really clever guys. And they would disagree around stuff, and we would disagree around a lot of things, you know, and I can get quite argumentative for those who know me. And we would start drawing stuff on the board, and the amount of understanding that that creates, if you just simply listen and write down what people are saying so that they can see it. Otherwise, it's words that are just flying around the room and you keep circling. But if you start writing things down and you use visual ways to find agreement, it really, really, really helps. Then if there isn't a UX process or a structure, irrespective of what your level is, suggest one. Whether it's IXDF, whether it's IDO, whether it doesn't really matter, whatever model you can find, to just explain to people what the process means. Because I might know it well because I've done the MIT design thinking course or the IXDF or whatever it is, but other people don't. And I think often I get passionate and I get excited and I talk about things and I leave people behind. So I watched a really cool podcast with Stephen Fry. I think it was the one that you shared with me. And one of the things he said was, most people are like children. They need to see pictures to understand. And I think we all like that, right? It makes complex processes a lot easier to digest. So use that power. So things to look out for in managing your stakeholders. So it's really important to remember that irrespective of how much work you do on yourself, there comes a time when you realize that you have an ineffective manager. And if things don't change over a long period of time, you can't keep compensating for it. So you have to remember that you can't keep taking things upon yourself. We need to find a good balance between taking responsibility and initiative, and then also saying no. And then there are also unreasonable stakeholders. So if you ever, I've fought many battles for my juniors in many boardrooms, and there are really unreasonable stakeholders. So remember that too, that it's not always you. Don't take responsibility for things that are not yours to solve. And it comes back to that conscientiousness, neuroticism aspect where we worry about things and we just constantly take stuff up, because if I don't do it, it's not going to get done. It will get done. It might not be perfect. It might not be on time. Somebody might get into trouble, but it's not everything is your responsibility. And also understand when it's time to move on, as I said. So now I'm going to hand over to Caitie. I'm going to exhale. Exhale.
So, as I was saying when I was telling you guys a bit about myself, when I left my job, I didn't really know what I was going to do. And I've been on a journey to kind of figure out what I'm good at and what I enjoy. And I've learned quite a lot of things along the way. So with the world, the kind of all the careers and every kind of all the different paths you can go down being so uncertain, there are some things that you can do about that. So first of all, it's really important. Like the number one thing is you need to understand yourself. Oh, now there's two. So getting that kind of clear picture of the person that you want to be, what does it look, how does it feel when you become that person that you want to be? And once you are that person, where do you go from there? Really having that kind of clear path, a vision in your mind of where you're aiming to go is really, really important. And the way that you get to that point is to collect data on yourself. So do a little diary study, spend a week where every time you do something at work, you write it down, you say, okay, today I had a meeting with my team. After the meeting, I felt like this. Then I spent 3 hours like doing some detailed design work. After that, I felt like this. Then I had a one-on-one with my manager, and after that, I felt like that. And you kind of get a better picture of the way things make you feel and the things that you enjoy and the things you don't enjoy. And you can kind of work towards crafting that ideal week where most of the time you're enjoying yourself. There's always going to be things you don't like doing, but you kind of get a little bit closer. And then to understand what you're actually good at, it can be really difficult. I really struggle to see what I'm good at, and sorry, it's just really, I don't know. Seeing what I'm actually good at versus what people say I'm good at or whatever it is, get actual data. So if you don't have performance reviews, make them happen. We can share a template of kind of, it's a list of soft skills and more technical skills. You fill it in, you rate yourself, then you cover what your rating is, you give it to your supervisor, and they rate you. And then you have a meeting and you discuss. You say, okay, you think I'm better at this than I think I am. Why is that? Or, oh, I think I'm a lot better and you are seeing something I'm not seeing. And it lets you kind of get closer to the truth of where you actually are. It also is a great tool for dealing with imposter syndrome, which Vicka will talk a little bit more about later. But yeah, just getting that feedback is really, really important. Some things to look out for when kind of figuring out the path that you want to go down. Something I was super guilty of for a really long time is pursuing what everybody else wanted for me and pursuing what seemed impressive, what made me look smart, what sounded good on LinkedIn. But it wasn't actually the thing that was fulfilling to me, and it wasn't what made me feel good about the work that I was doing and made me want to go to work. So looking for what truly speaks to you, not what your dad wants you to do, not what your manager is asking you to do because there's nobody else to do it. What do you actually want to do? And then in doing that, you need to stay curious, but with that comes the caveat of you need to be able to set boundaries. When you become the curious person who's always keen to try something, always keen to, yeah, let's just figure it out, I can make it happen, then people will rely on you and people will always ask you to do everything. So being able to have those conversations where you say, okay, I'm a little bit overwhelmed here, maybe we can do it together, or maybe we can kind of, maybe somebody else could do it, or not right now, kind of thing. Being able to set those boundaries is really, really important. Again, another caveat to that is that growing is really uncomfortable. You have to be able to push yourself to be able to get better at things. You have to get past that kind of that discomfort to then be comfortable again and know what you're doing. So understanding where your boundaries are, understanding that it can be uncomfortable and that's not always a bad thing, is really important. So just knowing that you need to understand yourself because you can't design a career without understanding the person who is going to be living in that career. It's really, really important. So next is how do you actually do this? So we're back to Alex. Alex she did the diary study on herself and she figured out she really likes problem solving She likes visualizing ideas, creating detailed designs, understanding human behavior, thinking of new and exciting solutions to problems. What Alex doesn't enjoy is talking to strangers, really repetitive tasks, and lots of writing. So some parts based on those specializations that we looked at before, some parts that might be a good fit would be interaction design. It's a lot of creative problem solving, user interface, or like prototyping. It moves quickly. It's lots of new things all the time. It's also detailed design. It can be design work in there as well. Innovation and technology, obviously, also they really enjoy doing new and exciting things. Visual design, obviously, and then usability evaluation. It's less about talking to people, more about kind of actually evaluating the things that have been said and coming up with solutions to those things. Some things that maybe Alex wouldn't enjoy is technical or UX copywriting. Obviously, they don't like writing. Let's not go down that path. User experience and leadership. Right now, based on Alex's skills, it doesn't seem like they're ready for leadership. That doesn't mean that they'll never be ready. If that's something that she wants to pursue, she can pursue it and she can learn those skills to get there. Then user needs research, lots of talking to strangers, not a good idea. And then information architecture, I don't think it would be super creatively stimulating. So the way that I came up with all of this was I came up with this character, the likes and the dislikes. I gave ChatGPT those specializations, and this is what I got. So do that for yourself. It doesn't need to be a huge, big thinking exercise. Track yourself, put in the things that you're interested in, and see what the robots have to say. They might be able to help you. And it just kind of allows you to focus in on paths to go down and things to explore. So yeah, that's a nice exercise that you could do for yourself. And now I'm exhaling. So managing feedback, it's an integral part, and I spoke about how important getting feedback is. So first thing to understand is that there are people who are just not good at giving feedback. And there are a lot of reasons why people might not be good at giving feedback. They might be under pressure themselves. They might feel like they don't have the time. They don't have the mental capacity to focus on what you're doing. Maybe they just aren't good at giving feedback, and that's just something they need to work on. So knowing that's the reality then takes me to the next point. It's that the first rule of design feedback is that it is not personal. The second rule is that it's not personal. Third rule, not personal. And you can guess the rest. It should never be about you. If it is about you, that person is probably not giving you effective feedback. If it ever feels like an attack on who you are as a person, that's not design feedback, and that's not what you need. Ways that you can manage this process and get a bit of like higher quality feedback. Be really specific at the beginning of a feedback session. Set the context of what's going on. Tell them how long you've been working on what you're working on, what assumptions you made in whatever you've come up with. And then specifically, what are you looking for feedback on? Are you looking for overall layout feedback? Are you looking for feedback on the placement of the button on this screen? Tell them what you want, because otherwise they're going to get distracted by other things. They're going to start nitpicking on something that you haven't spent any time on. And it's just going to be frustrating for both of you. Next, make sure it's a discussion. So coming back to it not being personal, make it a conversation. Don't jump to getting defensive. Just take a breath and have a conversation about it. So part of this is also when you work on something for a long time and you've been kind of iterating on this one thing, and then that's all you have to show, that's really scary. You can't have a discussion about that. If they don't like that, that's it. Where do you go from there? So my advice would be, specifically in design, if you're going to make a big change, if you're going to kind of go off on another path, make a copy of what you've done and be able to show your journey through your design process, because then you can also, maybe they have an idea and you've already tried that. you can go and show them and say, well, here I tried it and these are the reasons I thought it didn't work. And maybe they like it more and then you can go from there. But having that one thing that you've spent hours and hours and hours on, and then where do you go from there? So that can kind of help it feel less daunting and less like, what do I do now? Also, if you do get feedback that you don't like or you feel super defensive, take a second to just reflect first. Try and understand why it hurts so much. Try and understand kind of what it's triggering, where it's coming from. Maybe there's something where you don't feel great about something that's going on in your design, or you were already unsure about it, and then somebody just kind of, it's like, well, it's awful. And then you're like, yeah, I kind of knew it was awful, but this sucks. And now what do I do? So just kind of understanding why it like upsets you so much before sort of lashing out or getting super defensive is important to kind of build trust as well. And then lastly is just prioritizing action. So at the end of every feedback session, making sure you have a list of every single thing that you need to do, and maybe every single thing that the person giving you feedback needs to do. So if you didn't have time to finish going through all the screens, they need to have that as an action item that they need to go through the rest of the screens. So you kind of, everybody knows what they're responsible for. And then in your next feedback session, you can go through that list and check them off and check them and everything. Everyone's on the same page. We're all happy. So yeah, I'm going to give this back to Vicka.
Thanks, Caitie.
Oh, does anybody else have any kind of challenges with feedback or the other things that I spoke about that they'd like to ask about?
There was a comment that came through chat about too much paralysis.
Yeah.
So for me, receiving too much feedback leads to decision paralysis. There's a fine line between standing by your design, recognizing what feedback is truly valid, and the instincts to please others.
Yeah.
Very, very true.
Yeah, I think it's again part of that kind of like setting the context, but also prioritizing action. I think is when you get to the end and you've got all of this feedback and now you're like, well, what do I do? Ask, well, what do I do? It's like, which option are we going for here? Am I doing all of these and making all of these different versions? Cool, I can do that. But making sure you have like a solid action plan of where to go with your feedback, I think can help with that. Yeah.
I think just a challenge that I've had recently, actually, and I'm still sort of wrestling with is when you go into an interaction with somebody who already has preconceived ideas, and they're not looking for you to bring creativity to the table. They're looking for you to basically
just do exactly what they say you must do. I suppose that can also be quite demotivating to any designer. Yeah.
Be it a customer experience designer or a UX, UIX designer.
Yeah.
You started something.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think advice on how to sort of handle those types of interactions that you don't become demotivated and it doesn't deflate you and it doesn't sort of maybe turn you into a bit of an imposter because
Yeah, I think it is like it's part of what Vicka was saying as well about kind of explaining to people what the process is and explaining the value of the process, I guess, as well, where it's kind of maybe being really upfront about it and saying, well, do you want me to just do what you want me to do because I can do that, but that's not what you're paying me for, like probably not worded exactly like that, but kind of explaining to them why it's important to think of different ideas. And I think it can be a tendency to kind of want to, with a person like that, want to just wow them and blow them away and be like, them to be like, I was totally wrong and you're right. It's probably not going to happen, but kind of trying to bring them into the process could help as well. Yeah.
Definitely. So I agree. And I think one of the other things as well, and I've been on both sides, right? So where I'm receiving feedback and I'm giving feedback, and it's an ongoing journey about learning and understanding different people. But I don't know how many of you are familiar with Alan Watts, but he says one of my favorite phrases of his, if somebody tells you that the earth is flat, you go like, okay, let's walk to the edge. Right? So it's like, if that's exactly what you want and you want that and it's not negotiable, then it's a good opportunity to step away from the ego and saying, like, I have to add value. And I'm not saying everything is rooted in ego, but we all want to experience meaning and purpose most of the time. Most of us do. And it's an opportunity to just walk with the process, and we've had this, where I have a very clear idea about what it is that I want, and I want to be collaborative, and I want to be like, but what do you think? And then sometimes it's just easy to just actually creates a lot of ease. Okay, let's do it. Let's just do it. Detach from it. It's like, yeah, let it go and then see what happens, because often you're going to find that you're going to go through the full cycle and you're going to iterate again 9 out of 10. And I tend to resist and I tend to stand up for the rights and the process, but it's not always helpful, so I hope that, yeah. So keeping the time in mind. Right, so I want to ask a question to anybody and everybody. So what do you understand as identifying with imposter syndrome? Any thoughts, feelings? Yes, please. This role is not for you. Okay, that's a good one, very good one. Anyone online? Nothing yet. Okay. So my idea of imposter syndrome was that I don't know what I'm doing and I'm going to be found out, right? But the truth is, and this is Lisa's, very distinctly Lisa's input, is that we're probably not that good at pretending. Like, we really aren't, And you're probably not an imposter, even if you experience it, right? So when I was working on this with Brendan, one of the things that he highlighted in the beginning is that it's absolutely normal, and Lisa reiterated it, to feel uncertain in a new environment. So is it really imposter syndrome, or is it that we feel uncomfortable doing something that we're not very familiar with? And I keep studying, and my brother believes I should be in academia, but I keep studying, I keep doing new things. So I'm always doing something new. And I always feel like an imposter and like I don't know what I'm doing because I'm always learning something, right? So it's important to remember in these processes, if you are entering anything new, whether it's UX or something else, you are going to feel uncomfortable. And that's okay. It doesn't mean you're an imposter. And I know that corporate environments are very difficult to bring vulnerability into. And they're very difficult. It's a difficult space. And there's specific cultures that don't encourage vulnerability. But it's the most liberating feeling. That's why the three of us work so well together, between Lisa, myself, and Caitie, is I can easily say, I'm not good at this. I don't want to do this. I'm just not going to add value. And someone else picks it up. And we do that all the time on every project. And that's why we work well. So learning to practice that as micro practices with people that you trust can help you build up your confidence and becoming more comfortable with being uncomfortable. The second thing is trust the process. Now, this is probably not going to be popular with employers, but the thing is that somebody wrote your job spec, somebody recruited people, somebody interviewed you, and somebody hired you, right? So you belong in your role. Because if you were hired incorrectly, it's not just your responsibility. You're not that good a liar. Highly likely that you're not. So that's important to remember. And then when I went back to work, I had to deal with, after my sabbatical, I had to do research in 3 different countries for a group of banks with 3 different systems in Botswana, Namibia, and Zambia, and come up with recommendations for one consolidated system on a budget, right? It's a lot to handle. It really was. And I sat in front of my computer often and I thought, I don't think I know what I'm doing. And I probably didn't, just to be honest. But I had to figure it out when I started the process. But the point is, I looked for evidence, and I looked for evidence to find out, is it really true that I don't know what I'm doing? Is there anything else to confirm my suspicions and my perception about myself? Or am I just obsessing about my own performance? So remember that energy flows where attention goes. And the thing with identifying with imposter syndrome is we lose focus of the thing that we actually need to do. It blurs our focus and it makes things feel really fuzzy and what do you now grab next, right? So how do you handle that? So one thing that really, really works for me when I feel uncertain in any environment when I'm dealing with work is I shift my focus to the value that I want to add. So in building this presentation, I had to ask myself, or when we were together, obviously, not just me, but I constantly ask myself, what do I know about UX designers' experience in the field today, right? But I also know that a design is a hypothesis until it's been tested with the users. So here I am because I believe that there's some value to be added, and I look forward to knowing if it's been done, very humbly, because I don't know if it is. So I had to constantly shift my focus to the value that I want to add through sharing this content with you, and that's important. Also, focus on what you can control right now. What people think about you, what they say about you, and how they say it about you is completely outside of your control. And I know these things are obvious, but it's really difficult to remember that in a moment of stress, right? And especially when you're doubting yourself. But if somebody has a problem with you, trust them to have the courage to come and tell you that. And that's where the evidence part comes in. Designing with curiosity and not certainty. Humble pie that I've eaten many, many times. I get so excited and we go and we do usability testing and I learn every single time. It's all about learning more and it's never going to stop being that. It's just what it is. Whoops, I pressed the wrong button. Why did I press the button? I just want to go back. Okay, so work with purpose, not ego. And that's a tricky one. Keep in mind all of the other things and remember that you've got something to deliver and that is the part that should be important, not how you are perceived by other people. And lean into the process because you're going to learn in the end. You are a novice at this and it's okay to feel uncertain and it's okay to not know and be okay with that. It's probably the most useful thing that we can learn. So, Lisa said, I quote, "You are both the designer and the design." Right? And the privilege that most of us have in this community is we are familiar with the design thinking process. And if you're not, check it out. Those of you who are, we always start in empathizing, define the problem statement. And the best way to define the problem statement is to understand where are you at? Where are your stakeholders at? What is happening in the space? And make sure you prioritize that because if you just go with the flow, everybody else is forever going to be dictating what you're going to do. So we can design for ourselves. And to recap what we spoke about as I exhale, it gets exciting. So understand your environment. And we'll share all the tools with you. Understand your stakeholders. They are humans. I know it's tough, but they are. Work with your talents and your abilities. And the things that Caitie has shared with you are the things that I've had the privilege of learning from her. And I've been in this industry for a couple of decades longer than her, but it's still every day, you just never stop learning, right? Proactively manage feedback, as we've spoken about extensively. And also through this process, remember that one day you are probably going to give feedback to other people. So remember what it feels like to be in the seat. Remember what it's like to receive it. And then remember, you're probably not an imposter because you're not that good. We're not actors. I don't know how many of you have an acting degree. I don't. But yeah, so it's more and more exciting. So now, we've got a 5-minute micro practice. I know some of you need to go, but you're welcome to stay. It's just 5 minutes. And Caitie is going to take us through it.
Welcome.
But it's just 5 minutes. So.
All right, so we're going to do a little meditation just so that we can feel super grounded. So you can just come to sit in a comfortable seat, both feet on the ground, feeling the earth beneath you. You can close your eyes if you feel comfortable or just soften your gaze in front of you. Just take a moment to feel the weight of your body resting into the earth through your seat, your legs, your back, or wherever your body is making contact. There's nowhere you need to be but here, and there's nothing else to do but to notice. Let's begin by noticing sound. Without trying to find or name the sounds, Just open your awareness to what's already here. Maybe you can hear the hum of the room. Maybe you can hear a voice in the distance. Or maybe just the sound of your own breath. Let the sounds rise and fall like waves, noticing, receiving, and then letting them go. Now gently bring your awareness to your sense of touch. Feel the air on your skin, the fabric of your clothing, or maybe the way that your hands are resting on your body. Just noticing what that feels like. Now, shifting your focus to your sense of smell. There's no need to force anything, just notice. Maybe there's a scent in the air, or maybe it just smells neutral. Whatever's present, just notice. And now, even if your eyes are closed, gently bring your awareness to your sense of sight. You might notice light flickering through your eyelids. Maybe you can see shapes or colors, or just darkness. Simply become aware of what the eyes perceive without effort or expectation. Now finally bringing your awareness to your sense of taste. Even if you're not eating or drinking anything, you might notice that there's a taste in your mouth, or maybe just the sensation of swallowing or breathing. Just allowing this to be part of your experience of this present moment. You're not trying to change anything, you're just noticing. Just letting all of your senses anchor you here, in this moment, in your body, in your breath. Now let the edges of your attention soften. Maybe you notice all of your senses together. You're gently held in this awareness, noticing and allowing. Let's all take one more slow, kind breath in, and a long, easy breath out. And gently begin to return to the space around you, maybe moving your fingers or your toes, maybe rubbing your thumbs over the tips of your fingers, and finally opening your eyes whenever you're ready. You're here, whole, and grounded in your experience. So I hope you all enjoy that. I chose to do this meditation because I think it's something that you can do on your own as well. You don't need somebody to guide you through it. So if you ever are feeling in a super panicked state, another really nice technique is noticing and naming out loud potentially 5 things that you can hear, 4 things you can touch, 5 you can see, 4 you can touch, 3 you can hear, 2 you can smell, and 1 you can taste. And this will also be in the resources that we send. But yeah, it's just coming back to your body, feeling grounded. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed. So here's our feedback form if you would like to give us feedback and get the resources. But thank you so much, everybody.